Welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm your host, Corey Graham. Join us here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where the independent new authors come first. The new book that's just been put out by Janiece Hines is an inspiring memoir. It's titled Worried Warrior, and we're going to talk all about this right now. Janiece is here with me at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Janiece, welcome to the show. I really appreciate you joining me here tonight.
Hi, thanks for having me.
The pleasure's all mine, Janiece. I'm curious about Worried Warrior. Can you tell me what readers are going to get into here?
So Worried Warrior is basically documenting my pretty much entire journey of navigating healing after a devastating divorce that shattered like my whole world, and me just trying to find some type of healing. I went into spiritual exploration and just ultimately finding my way back to Christ.
Janiece, what kinds of readers did you have in mind for this?
The readers I had in mind for this is someone that is dealing with grief, heartbreak, any type of brokenness where you're in a space of not knowing who you are or where to turn.
So what was that spark? What made you decide to sit down and get started on this?
The thing that made me decide to get started was knowing that I wanted to be someone that I needed during the time of my brokenness. Because at the time, it's so hard to find any type of insight or to know direction, or even if you have direction, it's always not the best direction. So I wanted to be exactly what I needed during my darkest moments.
So what does your writing background look like, Janiece? Are you experienced in this, or are you new to the whole thing?
I am new to the whole thing.
So is this a long process then for you?
It actually wasn't. It took me about 7 to 8 months to complete the entire project.
So once you handed your manuscript off to your publisher, Christian Faith, and you got that whole process started, what did you find the most challenging part about that publishing end of things?
Not knowing how the book was going to be received and questioning, in my own mind, did I explain everything properly? I knew exactly what I wanted to say and what I wanted to put out there, but making sure that that was presented in a way that everyone could understand and they can actually be engulfed in the story to know exactly what I'm talking about.
And there's nothing like seeing that finished product. And when you were finally holding your first copy for the first time, looking at this, your name's on the cover and everything, what was that like for you, Janiece?
It is a feeling that I have never experienced before. I said before my book was actually published that I feel like I always start things and then it kind of never gets to completion. So to actually have my book in my hand and actually realizing all that I went through, whether it was the emotional toll that I took or the time that it took to do it, and having it in my hand and knowing that I felt like I finally did something to completion, and not just that, I did something that's going to be worth something to someone else. It was just an amazing feeling. I was overjoyed, literally.
And now it's official. You're a published author. So when you think about that, Janiece, what's the most rewarding aspect of it for you?
The most rewarding aspect of it to me is having something that I can leave behind for my daughters, whether they get older and face times where they feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, to know that I actually have something in writing that they can hold and read and know, if my mom went through it, I know I can go through anything. I can come out on the other side of absolutely anything. So that is the most rewarding thing for me.
So looking down the road, have you given thought to maybe writing some more, getting some more books published?
I have. I am actually kind of in the process. I've taken a little hiatus, but I'm wanting to work on a book that is more uplifting. The first one is a lot of trauma, but now it's I want to work on something that's the other side of the trauma. So where it gets even better than where the last book left off.
Well, we have a lot of aspiring authors listening to us, and I'm sure you learned an awful lot along the way of doing this. So, Janiece, do you have anything maybe in the way of advice that you could throw out there for them?
I would say for anybody that is interested, I always say now, everyone has a story inside of them. And a lot of times we sit on things thinking that it's not important or nobody's going to benefit from what you have to offer. But if you know it's something that is on your mind that you want to get out there, whether it's your story, whether it's inspiration, or even if it's just a children's book, do not give up on that dream. Just keep going. Give yourself grace throughout the process, and you will come out on the other side of it.
Well, this is certainly an important book. Again, it's titled Worried Warrior. It's written by Janiece Hines and published by Christian Faith Publishing. So find it at places like Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Janiece, it's been really wonderful talking with you tonight, learning about Worried Warrior and everything. Thanks again for joining me.
Thank you.
The book I'm looking at right now is an exploration of the author's life as told through a collection of photographs and poetry. It's titled Breaking the Vault. It's written by Michael J. Mellion, and Michael is right here with me now at the show, and we get to talk all about this book. Michael, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Great to reach out to everybody.
It's great to be talking with you, and I can't wait to find out all about Breaking the Vault. So, Michael, can you tell me all about this?
Sure. Well, just start by saying that it's a collection of poetry I've written ever since I was probably 12, 13 years old. It's also a collection of quotations or aphorisms, pertinent to love, leadership, and life in general. Seems like all those three things, you can always find a place to put a writing in.
Michael, what kinds of readers did you have in mind when you were writing this?
I think, everybody, people that, appreciate and love nature, people that are in a leadership position with their work or their relationship with employees and relationship with their clients. Effectively can also individually reach out to people that, my mother suffered from bipolar disorder. So as a child, it's confusing at times. And there are a lot of adults, young and old both, that have been exposed to that and really haven't had an open forum to review it or understand it and make sure that they don't blame themselves for some of the things that occurred in the family.
So how did Breaking the Vault come about, Michael? What sparked you to get started on it?
Well, the concept of breaking the vault, too, is based on memory. I mean, memory is a pretty amazing thing. You never realize how important it is and how close it is to being there or not being there. It's a filament. It's a fine line. I actually, back in 2008, came home. I had a bit of a headache, and that's because I'm an obsessive-compulsive workaholic and, wanted to spend some time with my wife and my kids. And I just said, you guys, let's catch up later. And my wife thought that was unusual. She called me back and said, are you okay? And I said, well, I feel like I'm having a neurological disconnect. And she's like, plain English, Mike. And I said, my words haven't matched my thoughts. To make a long story short, we went to Hopkins Hospital in Harrod County, and they got me on a transport out of there that weekend. And Monday morning, I had some pretty elite staff at Johns Hopkins, neurosurgeons, working on basically saving my life. And they did a great job. I'm here and able to talk about it. But it's been a journey, too. Don't let me kid you. It's a little, you had to kind of find and rewire and recircuit yourself. I think anybody that's been through any type of brain trauma understands that better than anyone potentially can.
So what does your writing background look like? Have you ever been published before this?
No, it's first. Really, I never had the intention of publishing it or putting it out there. It's really for my own self, and then friends and family and people started asking me to read things, and it's really capturing the imagination of people that have a lot of respect for, and vice versa, and try to paint a picture as to what happened, particularly things, some of my life experiences working with travels to Europe and being a social worker in St. Mary's County in Southern Maryland and working with young children and their adults, trying to point everybody in the right direction and make sure that the right things are in place to help those in need.
I'm looking at the book right now, and this is a beautiful cover. Can you tell me how that all came together?
Well, I owe that to my son, Zachary. Yeah, he's an amazing young man. He always has been artistically talented, just absolutely gifted. And we took a couple runs at it initially without Zach. And then finally I just said, Zach, can you help me? Here's what I need. And yeah, the first run was amazing. And then I said, well, could you put a couple of herons in flight? Because we're talking a little bit about the Chesapeake Bay and the estuaries and marsh. And sure, Dad, no problem. And yeah, what he turned out I thought was unbelievable. And we're very happy with the cover.
I think a lot of lives will be touched by this book. Again, it's titled Breaking the Vault. It's written by Michael J. Mellion and published by Newman Springs Publishing, and really available everywhere like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and right down the street at your local bookshop. Michael, it's been fantastic talking with you, learning all about breaking the vault. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, and I look forward to talking again. Thanks, guys.
I'm looking at a book that's a faith-based story of a sheep and her shepherd. It's titled The Adventures of Silly Sally and the Big Storm. This is written by Pamela M. Starnes, a.k.a. Mimi, and Mimi is right here with me now. We get to talk all about this book. Mimi, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining me here tonight.
Thank you, Corey, for having me. I look forward to it.
Well, I'm looking forward to learning all about the adventures of Silly Sally and the Big Storm. So, Mimi, can you tell me all about this story?
Sure. Silly Sally is a sheep, as you've already said. She faces many challenges, and in this particular story, there's a big storm, and she lives in the valley with her shepherd and her cousins, but it gets hot there. So they have to escape the heat, and they have to go up the mountains to the top pastures where there's cool water and cool breezes and few predators, if any. But the trip is hard. The story is about their trip up the mountains, and they encounter a storm, but the shepherd finds a ledge to move the sheep under, and he protects them there. And they arrive, and he's strumming his lyre, and they're all eating grass, and everybody's happy.
Mimi, would you say this is a book for young children?
I would. I have friends who have children as young as 6 months who enjoy it, and up to 8 years who enjoy reading it out loud. So, yes.
So how did the idea for this story come about, Mimi?
Well, years ago, my oldest granddaughter and I were memorizing the 23rd Psalm. And the first book about Silly Sally is The Adventures of Silly Sally and the Prickly Bush. And the big storm idea came about because it's something that there's no escaping from. It is there. And so the sheep had to trust their shepherd would put them in a safe place. But in memorizing the 23rd Psalm, we realized Psalm 23:4 says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." And that's really the whole point. As believers, we pass through many storms, and sometimes it is the valley of the shadow of death. And we have a good shepherd who will go through it with us. As a matter of fact, we have a friend here, I'm in western North Carolina, and Helene came through back in August and did a lot of damage in our mountains. And we have a friend who lives in one of the hardest hit areas. And he said his 4-year-old daughter cries every night now when it rains because she's afraid. And so I gave him a copy of this book, and I said, be sure and tell her that Jesus is there in the storm. And he said it's been a real comfort for her to know that.
So was this a book that took you a long time to write and publish and everything?
You know, it's funny. I did it backwards. We drew, Naomi, my granddaughter, who is the illustrator, we drew the first one first, and then I put the words to it. Well, this time, she's a busy girl, plays volleyball, and so it's hard to get up with her. So I just wrote the book first, and then I just had to run her down when I could catch her to draw the pictures for me. So long time, probably 6 months, maybe, yeah. I mean, I don't know if most writers would consider that a long time, but for a children's book, that's a while.
And there's nothing like seeing that finished product after all the work that you put into it. So, Mimi, when you were holding this for the first time, what was going through your head? What were you feeling?
I was pleased. I was so pleased. You're right. You don't know until you have it in your hands what it's going to look like. And the illustrations even translate from the rough copy, the hard copy, to the page. They travel through cyberspace and land differently. And maybe it's just because it's in a book form and wow, I'm holding it in my hands now. That makes it so great.
Now, when you think back to that publishing process, what did you find the most challenging part about it?
I don't know. Maybe I was impatient. It's like, hurry up.
Mm-hmm.
But, really, it wasn't their fault. It's just it's just life in the publishing world. I guess my own impatience was the only thing that, stood out to me.
Again, it's titled The Adventures of Silly Sally and the Big Storm. This is written by Pamela M. Starnes, a.k.a. Mimi, and published by Covenant Books, so find it places like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Mimi, it's been really wonderful talking with you and learning all about Silly Sally. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you, and I want to just add that Covenant Books has been the best to work with. So thank you, Corey.
I'm looking at the new book written by Charles Carr. It's a story for young readers titled Sally's Dress. And I'm going to find out all about this book. Charles, the author, is right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Charles, welcome to the show. I really appreciate you being with me tonight.
I appreciate you having me, Corey. Thanks.
Absolutely, Charles. Can you tell me all about Sally's Dress and the story you've written here?
Well, yeah, it's a story that was written for, I guess, from ages 4, 5 up to 11, 12. It's a very short read. So if you're an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, whatever you are, I would want you to buy this book for that preteen that's in your family. What it's going to do is, the book, in essence, it exposes the evils of socialism, but it's written as a child's story so that even a 7 or 6-year-old is going to be able to understand, wow, that wasn't fair. Why did that happen to that little girl who was trying to buy a dress by selling lemonade all day in a 94-degree day, selling lemonade to try to make enough money to buy a dress? And then the evil socialist mayor of the town comes and confiscates half of her money to redistribute. You know, Corey, you're never going to sit down with a 6, 7, 8-year-old niece or a grandchild. You're not going to sit down and start talking about socialism. But if you sit down with them and read this story to them, and it's a quick read, it's 26 pages, it has illustrations, it has pictures, keep the child engaged. After you're done reading them this, maybe it's going to take you a half hour, maybe, they're going to initiate that conversation with you. They're going to say, Grandpa, what is socialism? I never heard of it before. And wow, boom, the door is open. And now you can step in as, whoever you are and really explain to them exactly what socialism is and kind of set them in the right direction before academia gets a hold of them. So that's basically what the book is about. Listen, Corey, all of these writers, and there's plenty of them, and I have many of the books, all the big guys with the talk show, Sean Hannity, Deliver Us from Evil, Mark Levin has books that I have on my shelf here, Michael Savage, they all write these fantastic books. But those books are geared for people that are 20 to, whatever, adults. A child's not going to understand those books. And we're not changing anybody's mind that's over 20 years old. You get that person that comes out of college with the blue hair and the nose ring, and they're walking down the street with thousands of other college graduates holding up a sign that's promoting democratic socialism. You're not changing those people's minds. I don't care what book you write. They're set for the rest of their life. So we have to chalk them up and just say there's no point in writing a book for that only like-minded conservatives are going to. I mean, I love their books, and I have them, and I've read them, but they're not doing anything to change the minds of the people whose minds we need to. My goal is to try to save the next generation because the last 2 generations, they're gone. They're lost. And so that's basically why I wrote this. I want the parents, I want the grandparents, the aunts and uncles, buy the book, but just don't buy it. Sit down and read it with somebody in your family who's under 12 years old. The book is going to enable you to have that conversation. Remember Sally, she worked all day and the guy took half of her money? Do you remember? Do you think that's fair? So it's a cute little story. I'm hoping that millions and millions of people buy the book and read it to their children because our kids are being misled.
Again, the title of the book is Sally's Dress. It's written by Charles Carr and is published by Christian Faith Publishing. So you can find it everywhere, really, places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Charles, got to thank you again for coming on the show and telling me all about Sally's dress. I had a nice time talking with you.
I appreciate being here, Corey. Thanks for having me.
I'm looking at a book that's a resource for nurturing faith in children. It's written by Barbara Rosenbaum, and it's titled Children's Bible Fun Workbook. Barbara is right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, and we're going to talk all about it. Barbara, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here tonight.
Oh, thank you so much.
Barbara, can you tell me all about Children's Bible Fun Workbook? What people can expect here?
Well, the backstory is that I was visiting my daughter in Indiana, living here in El Paso, and on Sunday we took my great-grandchild to church. And I know that he enjoys going to church, but his parents don't encourage it. Flying home in November of 22, I was just thinking, what can I do to help him get to know who God is and get him in his life? Well, I ended up buying a notebook and I start typing information in the book. And when I got to page 6, I thought, I could write a book. And the concept of the book, you look up a verse. The verse is on the page. So you find the verse, and then there's lines for you to write the verse. And in the middle of the page, I'm going to tell you what I think about it. And at the bottom, it says, what are your thoughts? So the plan of the book is for an adult with a child to go through this way of education, discuss everything that is involved, and come up with, well, what are you thinking about this now? So I'm encouraging education of the Bible in a discussion group fashion, in a family, in a Sunday school, in a school, wherever people gather, as well as to adults who are intimidated by the Bible and don't know where to start.
Barbara, what age range of children do you think this is most suited for?
2 and up. If you wanted to start your child at a very, very young age, you could do this once a year and go over it as they get older. Because it is a family-based idea where a group can get together and discuss this verse, it could be any age.
So, Barbara, what does your writing background look like? Are you new to all this, or do you have experience in it?
Oh, no. This just happened. When that thought came, I could write a book. I called my friend, and I asked her to have breakfast with me. And when she saw the concept of the book, she was overwhelmed with joy. And she was my prayer partner, my support, and so much more in writing this book.
So being this is your first book and you've never done anything like this before, was this a really long process for you?
No. I listen to Christian radio when I'm driving around and I hear something, oh my goodness, that's such a good verse. And I'd call my daughter and say, text me this verse. And then that night I would come home and write it up. And all while I was writing the book, I kept getting these verses on the radio. And I was so impressed with how good that would fit into my book. Now, there are the verses about Jonah and the whale and Goliath, the big fun ones that are such magnificent, in the Bible. But these other verses were so well because it's encouraging God loves us. And you read a verse and you can find how much God loves us. And I encourage that. And I encourage the children, there's a place in there where, your parents, when they say go clean up your room, they're not punishing you. They just want you to do the right thing. So, we don't want you to get angry at them. Just go and do what God would want you to do. Clean up your room.
Well, it sounds like children and families everywhere are really going to benefit from this book. Again, the title is Children's Bible Fun Workbook. This book is designed to bring God into your conversations. It's written by Barbara Rosenbaum and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so you can find it at places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes, also right down the street at your local bookshop. Barbara, it's been really fantastic talking tonight. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
I'm delighted to be sitting down with author Dawn Anderson now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Dawn, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Well, I have to say congratulations. You have a new book out titled A Notable Woman. So, Dawn, can you tell me all about this and what readers are going to be getting into here?
Well, The Notable Woman is about a woman in the Bible, and 2 Kings chapter 4 and then again in chapter 8 that you rarely ever hear anything about, but there's two big portions of the Bible that she's in. And it struck me that I looked at it and said, this is going to be an interesting story. This is a great story. So also that I hadn't even thought about it, but at the time I was reading the Bible, I was reading her story, and a friend of mine, an associate pastor, we were on staff together in Florida at a church. He asked me, do you have any heroes? And I said, I've never even thought about heroes. What are you talking about? And he says, people you admire in life and stuff. And I knew that he admired Teddy Roosevelt. So I said, well, let me think about it. And overnight I thought about it, and I said, well, I know, I've got one, that she's an amazing person. That was this lady, the Shunammite woman, who's not even named in the Bible.
Well, Dawn, what kinds of readers did you have in mind for it?
It's not necessarily super biblical. It's a story about a lady who just overcomes all kinds of obstacles and odds, and it's good for Christians. But I think anybody would understand the book and enjoy the precept and the plot.
So, Dawn, when it comes to writing and publishing, have you done this kind of thing before, or are you new to all this?
No, this is my first time, and I am a novice.
So, was this a really long journey then for you, being your first time?
Yeah, it was actually, because I didn't even know how to get started. And now I'm in the middle of writing another book, the second book. And that should be done by about March or April.
Fantastic. So once you had your manuscript written, you handed that off to your publisher, to Covenant, and started that process. Dawn, what did you find the most challenging part about that publishing end of things?
I had no clue how to get started. But I had a friend who gave me some suggestions on how to do it. And he said, your first book, you might want to self-publish. And so that's what I did.
And then when you finally got your first copy in, you were holding this for the first time, Dawn. What kind of a moment was that like for you?
I did a little dance.
I love it.
It was a long time coming, and it was a lot of work and a lot of exploration and just being led. I've never even heard of a publishing agent. I heard of a literary agent, but I've never even heard of a publishing agent until the one covering books introduced herself to me. Says, okay, well, and that was a big help. That was a huge help. She was great.
And now that you are officially published, Dawn, what's the most rewarding aspect of it all for you?
Just that I did it. I made it. I finished it. I thought about the book for literally 20 years. And then the last 2.5 years, I started writing it and finishing it and stuff. But yeah, that was just the best part was just the fact that I finished it. And a lot of friends and relatives were celebrating and patting me on the back, which felt good too.
This is a big undertaking. It's really difficult to do it all alone. So were there people there that could maybe encourage you and motivate you along the way?
Yeah, I had a couple of ladies that actually were professional editors who read my manuscript and tore it up and redlined it and embarrassed me. And and my wife was tremendous. She passed away this last May.
I'm sorry.
But she was a tremendous influence on the book. She actually said, all kinds of things that, I had to look back and reflect on. And I said, yes, you're right, which was really good. But my two editors, they were two ladies that helped me significantly because I'm a guy trying to write about a woman. And that's a challenge right there.
Well, this is something that happens to so many of us authors. It's writer's block, and it can be the worst. Dawn, is that something you ever had to struggle through?
No, the Bible was my outline, which was great. I didn't have to do an outline, but there was a couple things that I added into it when I read the book, the first manuscript, and I said, well, I need to add a couple of chapters here for explanation and for benefit later in the book. So
I think so many people will be inspired by this book. Again, the title is A Notable Woman. It's written by Dawn Anderson, and this is published by Covenant Books, so you can really find it anywhere, like Amazon and Barnes & Noble, iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Dawn, thanks again for coming on the show, telling me all about A Notable Woman. It was really great chatting with you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Joining me right now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, I'm really happy to welcome author Amanda Cooper. Amanda, welcome. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Gotta say congratulations. You have a new book out. It's titled What Should Cookie Do? The Dark. So, Amanda, can you tell me all about the story you've written here?
Well, I have a dog named Cookie. She is the main character of these books, and she is actually scared of thunderstorm and the dark. So I wrote a little book about how her parents, which are me and my husband, have given her some suggestions on how to overcome these fears and ways that she can be brave during a thunderstorm or the dark. My background is early childhood education. So I was really thinking, and I wrote these books for children. They can relate to dogs in hopes that they could read these books and overcome their own fears and be brave during these times.
So what was that spark, Amanda? Was there something in particular that sparked you to get started on this?
Well, I was also a child who was scared of thunderstorms and the dark. But just as a teacher, I've had a lot of children come across my path who have these fears, and they don't always have someone who is there to help them know how to act or how to deal in these certain situations. So I don't know. It just popped into my head. It's something I wanted to do, kind of like a bucket list item. And so I gave it a shot. And here we are, 2 books later.
So you have 2 out there. Prior to this, did you have much writing experience?
Not anything on a professional level. I like to write poetry. I've always done a lot of reading as well. So I retired and I had a lot of time and I have a lot of creative energy. And so this was one outlet for me. And I have thoroughly enjoyed it. And just listening to some of the feedback that I get about these books, I had a teacher friend send me a video of her reading one of my books to her students.
Oh, wow.
And just to see the interaction between her and the kids and what the kids were asking and, some of their comments during the book. And it was exactly what I had in my mind that I was hoping would happen. That was a real treat to get that video.
Now, was this a book that took a long time to write and put through that publishing process, or did this all happen pretty quickly for you?
Well, my first book really was in my head a long time, kind of marinating, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then after I retired, I did put it down on paper and sent it off to a publisher, and they accepted it. So it was about a year through that process. And actually, before that one was done, I had my second one already kind of written out. So I just went ahead and turned it in as well, and it came out just this year, actually. So it wasn't a long process. I've got 2 more that I actually want to add to the series. They're still kind of marinating in my head as well.
There's nothing like holding it for the first time after all that work that you put into it. So what's it like when you finally get to hold the very first copy?
It's surreal. When you see your name on the front cover and the story that you've been working on, for however long and the illustrations that go with it, it really is a good feeling, and it's an accomplished feeling.
Yeah, the illustrations are so important when it comes to a book like this. Was that something that was a challenge for you to get lined up with what you're seeing in your head?
Well, I didn't do the illustrating. The publishing company did. What I did was I sent in pictures and I gave them descriptions of what I wanted it to look like. And they were really, really, really good at getting it all set up. And, they would send it to me and I would okay it. And I was really pleased. I was really excited about how it turned out because it went from my head to paper, which was awesome.
And when you think about it, you're published, your work is out there for the world. What's the most rewarding aspect of it all for you?
Really seeing the kids that I know who have read the books, family member kids, friends' kids, seeing them read the books and ask for those books to be read to them. That's rewarding to me because that was the whole point of me writing it. I really want to put these suggestions of how to be brave in these kids' hands. So I think that's the most rewarding part for me is to see it actually being used. And even if it just touches one kid and teaches one kid how to be brave, that would be really all I wanted out of it.
Oh, what a wonderful book. Again, this is titled What Should Cookie Do? The Dark. It's written by Amanda Cooper and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so it's available really everywhere, places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Amanda, thank you again for coming on the show and telling me all about What Should Cookie Do. It was nice talking with you.
Yes, it was a pleasure.
I'm looking at a book right now that explores the author's experiences growing up in New Jersey. It's written by Leanne Cosentino, and it's titled Jersey Shorts, Writing for My Life, a collection of poems and stories. And we're going to be talking all about this book. The author, Leanne, is right here with me now. Leanne, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining me tonight.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure. I'm very excited.
Absolutely. I'm excited to learn all about Jersey Shorts. So, Leanne, can you tell me what readers are going to get into here?
Well, it's an autobiographical book, but it's not written in that way. I wanted to use the reader's response theory and really make it more about the reader and me and not just about all the things that happened in my life. So it's really a book for everybody, mostly adults. I wouldn't recommend it for anybody younger than 18 because it's about tough times and really writing my way through all those times and sharing that idea of writing with other people and how they can journal and have that become their story.
Very nice. How did this come about, Leanne? What gave you the spark to start on it?
Well, I had been a teacher for so many years, and so it's basically taken about 20 years for me to write and collect all the poems. And then last year, I had so many tragedies. Years before that, I ended up in the hospital for a short time.
Oh, no.
And when I came out of the hospital, it was on my bucket list to make sure that this got done. And I basically almost finished writing it in a weekend, a very long weekend.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever done anything like this before, or do you have some experience in it?
Well, as I said, I was an educator, reading specialist, and I also worked with adults and little children and teachers. And so writing was really a part of my life. It's always been. I mentioned in the book that I had written my first poem when I was 4,
Oh, wow.
and I was very imaginative, and my mother wrote it down for me. I just came outside and was all excited about the spring, and she was able to write it for me. And then as I was growing up, she always told me that I was going to be a writer. I was going to write a book. And it was always in the back of my mind that it was something that I was going to accomplish. The thing about this book is it wasn't the story I was going to write. My husband's death pushed me to change and talk more about addiction and the tough times and our life together and all the things that had happened. Originally, it was going to be a book about Alzheimer's, the heart-wrenching but funny things that we went through doing that. And so that book is on its way at some point, but this just seemed to have to come out first. It was my past, a little bit of closure. And if you read through the 4 sections, you'll notice the last one is tiny short stories. And that's why I called the whole thing short. They're short poems, they're short stories. And it's easily accessible and readable for all sorts of people, especially people going through trauma. If you've been through trauma, you can't comprehend. It's really difficult to wrap your mind around things. So the fact that they're shorter hopefully will appeal to a bigger audience.
So once you handed this manuscript off to your publisher, to Newman Springs, you got that whole publishing process started. What did you find the most challenging part about all that for you?
For me, it was not so much the writing because, like I said, most of the collection had already been there. And I was really good at editing and revising, obviously, as a teacher. I mean, this is my forte. People used to call me a wordsmith, like a word nerd. I just really enjoyed that part of it. As far as the publishing, the hardest thing for me was deciding what to keep in and, what to move over. I had written some more short stories, and it was almost like just getting the topic and keeping the subject straight was a lot for me, figuring out what would stay in, what really needed to go into maybe a different sort of a book. So for a while, I was a little confused myself about what it was going to be, and I was under a lot of trauma, so it was a little bit hard to focus, but they made it so easy. They're really wonderful. They guide you every step of the way. So I didn't feel like I was just lost doing it as if, I were going to do it all by myself. It was very helpful.
Wonderful. Well, I know that so many readers are going to find help and inspiration in this book. Again, it's titled Jersey Shorts, Writing for My Life, a collection of poems and stories. This is written by Leanne Cosentino and published by Newman Springs Publishing. It's available really everywhere, Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes and traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Leanne, it's been really great talking with you tonight, learning all about your work here. Thanks again for talking with me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I would tell everybody, just do it. Write for your life. Thank you.
Author John M. Loveland has written a novel that explores an alternate history. It's titled The Reluctant President. John is here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, and we get to talk all about this. John, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining me tonight.
Well, thanks for letting me on.
Absolutely. I'm curious to learn all about The Reluctant President. So, John, can you tell me all about this story?
Well, it's based on a premise that actually almost happened in history. There was a point where President Truman was target of an assassination attempt that failed. But if that attempt had actually been successful, and depending on the timing, George C. Marshall, who was Secretary of State, could have become the president. And he was someone who was well-respected, totally apolitical, who never wanted to be in elected office, but who, for years, people tried to convince to run for president. So it raises an interesting scenario of what history would have been like if he had indeed been president.
Interesting. John, how were you inspired to write this? Where did this idea come from?
Well, I've always been an admirer of Marshall since I was introduced to him back in high school even, and I've, over the years, collected various books, read about everything about him that I could, but it always frustrated me that he's relatively unknown, especially to people in our generation, and that's essentially by his own design. He discouraged many attempts to basically be a celebrity in his time, turned down offers, very lucrative offers to write his memoirs and so on, and just wanted to kind of fade into obscurity. And it always, again, frustrated me that a man who was so important and who was such a model of what a public servant should be has just been forgotten by history.
So would you say fans of history, politics, and that kind of thing are the best readers for this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think that there are many things that go on in the book that are just parallels to what's going on in our country today. Scandals with the FBI, differences of opinion over foreign relations. And a lot of the book talks about the conflicts between the Arabs and Jews, leading to the creation of Israel back in the day that was the source for the assassination attempt on Truman. So there are many, many interesting parallels to what's actually going on in today's world that can be found in the book.
So what does your writing background look like, John? Do you have experience in this, or is this whole thing kind of new to you?
No, it's relatively new. I, have done a little bit of writing here and there, but nothing approaching, this level. It's just something that I've always been interested in trying to do. I've, had several different ideas over the years, but this one seemed to appeal to me, and I've really put a lot of time into the research and tried to make the events in the book are based as much on actual history as possible. They contain a lot of individuals who actually were part of those times. A lot of their actual words are in the book, again, and it tries to portray things as accurately as possible as far as the setting of those times.
Yeah, you were saying a lot of research went into this. So overall, was this a long process for you?
Yeah, I guess I got serious about this maybe about a year and a half ago. I had an opportunity to, put some time in to actually sit down and write. I've always been pretty busy with my work life and family life. And then I had a break about a year ago that gave me some time to actually sit down and get serious about this. And I just kind of gathered up all the research and so on and reading materials that I've had over the years and just started putting things together.
And once you got that manuscript all firmed up, you handed it off to Newman Springs, you started that publishing process. John, what did you find the most challenging part of that publishing end of things for you?
It was a bit longer of a process, I guess, than I anticipated. There was a lot of back and forth during the editing process, trying to make sure that everything was as clean and accurate and perfect as possible. It's something that I've been totally unfamiliar with. I'd never experienced before. So, there was a learning curve there to understand the process and so on. But again, working with them, the person I was working with was helpful with questions and guided me along. And right now, we're at the point where we're trying to see if we can sell some of these books by letting people know about them. And that's going to be the challenging part.
I think readers are really going to love this novel. Again, the title is The Reluctant President. It's written by John M. Loveland, published by Newman Springs Publishing, and available really everywhere, like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and iTunes, and also right down the street at your local bookshop. Well, John, it's been fantastic talking with you tonight and learning all about the reluctant president. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate the opportunity.
I'm looking at a book, the story that follows a family who must complete their tasks before enjoying television together. It's titled TV Time, and this is written by Dr.c, Millicent, Maleka, Edusei. Millicent is right here with me now. We're going to talk all about TV Time. Millicent, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. I appreciate you as well.
I appreciate you being here, and I'm curious about TV Time. So can you tell me about the story that you've written here?
Yes, it's a book about providing discipline and action towards task goals of the day, after school, or maybe on the weekends. It's a book written about activity that people are working around in terms of a family, a group or family. They are interested in other ideas that they have. So one would be a character that she's learning how to potty train. She's in her mind learning about the piece, and the mother is always on top of all the children. So she's expressing herself about what is expected of the day. And she wants to know, what will you do beforehand? So she winds up speaking to them in terms of these things that we need to do. We need to finish it now before TV time. So TV time is expressed in that way. And she's potty training her beforehand, and she's really encouraging reading. She's doing the same thing for her son, her eldest son. He's the kit. He's doing his lab. There's work to be done. It could be those weekends like a lab kit, or it could be his homework in general. He has the ideation of being a scientist, and he's so into it and so involved that the mother has to remind him that TV time is approaching, that you have to take a break and have family time together. So there's other ideas. There's a baby boy, and he's learning how to reach and climb, and he's being attentive to the actions of what the parent is signaling, which is the father. He wants to reach for a plane. He wants to do other things. He wants to repeat. The mother comes in. She's reminding them that it's TV time. And he has an idea of the routine, so he mocked with the parent that, we must sit and speak or sit and learn or do other things that has to do with the mother's, her mocking of monotones in the household. So that is the idea of TV time. TV time is a great opportunity for you to structure the day and make sure that all that is done with your own personal tasks. That family is very important. So not only can it be used for TV, but it can be used for other things like game day, or prayer day, different things of that nature. But it's the ideation that I used was TV time.
So how were you inspired to write this? How did you get the idea for it?
It's ironic. The character that had the potty trainer, I thought about her in first only for potty training. But then I realized that they're the youth, the younger part of the household, one of the youngest, and they sometimes are not aware of what's going on in their daily tasks. So they have things that you do that they can look forward to. So I brought up the idea that, there are expectations that are expected in the household of any kind from any age group. But this particular character, she's only expected to learn how to use the toilet and then also learn how to, connect it to how the family has a way of gathering without being the outsider per se. She's not, every family member doesn't need to have a potty training. Every family does need to participate in TV time. So I utilize that to say there's something that you can fall back on. That doesn't seem like we're pressured just because we're different from the family members themselves. At the same time, there's something you can look forward to.
Well, this book has a really great message. Again, it's titled TV Time. This is written by Dr.c, Millicent, Maleka, Edusei, and published by Covenant Books. So you can find it places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Millicent, it was really nice talking with you, learning all about TV Time tonight. Thanks again.
No, you're welcome. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, and I look forward to writing more books that would be of interest to people. So please look for me and my name and the titles that I have. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time as well, Reader's House.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. We hope to see you back here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.